not possible to talk about international economic governance and market regulation without also addressing China. This handbook is doing exactly that. Implicitly and explicitly, it's looking at the integration of China into the global economic system and the role China plays in institution building and institutional change in our modern days. Our contribution is actually taking an historical perspective, going back about 200 years when China was for the first time really integrating into the modern economic system. About 200 years ago, the Chinese elites thought about the Western world as something barbarian and certainly nothing to look at, to copy or to transfer in terms of institutions or otherwise. At that point in time, China was integrated into the global system by force. It was forced to accept Western institutional settings, it was forced to accept Western templates and somehow accommodate them with in their economic and social-economic system. Since then, a lot has happened. In the Maoist period, China was not actually part of the global economic system. It was a very isolated place. But with the reform and opening up movement under Deng Xiaoping, that has changed. China has now voluntarily integrated itself into the International Division of Labor and become a very powerful part of that. But while China has for about 30 years really been pushing towards marketization, it has been accepting more and more market-oriented institutional templates. It's been transforming its economy and learning a lot about Western economic governance and market regulation. But China has always been looking at adapting these Western templates to its own specific cultural and political situation. As such, there has never been a one-to-one transfer of Western institutions to China. And what we're seeing since about 10 years is that China is coming out to the world now very much self-assertive, it's very much self-conscious, and is offering its own institutional templates to the global system. What we are observing today is that China is propagating its own ideas how economics should be governed, how markets and technologies should be regulated. Furthermore, in these days where we see global tensions on the rise, we might look at the beginning stages of a new fragmentation of the global economic system. The global economic system, which consists more of islands, of fragmented islands in which key players dominate these various islands. And China is doing everything it can in order to be the center of one major fragment in this global setting. It is introducing its own ideas of institutions. We see this, for example, in Chinese-style multilateralism, or we see it in hybrid institutions, which are a far cry away from our Western understanding of how enterprise and the state should be separated from each other. We see hybrid institutions like NDREs or SOCOEs, state-owned enterprises, which are on the one hand commercial enterprises and on the other hand regulatory agencies. This is something which certainly does not fit into our Western understanding of how to govern a market economy. But it might become a very influential factor in a Chinese-dominated realm of our economic interaction. Especially in the global south, China might have real chance to propagate its ideas, and it's worthwhile to have a look at that. So we are living in highly interesting times where institutional change and the build-up of new institutions is for the very first time since many, many years no longer just determined by Western interests, but where we see politically, culturally alien economy, society coming up and introducing its own ideas to economic governance.